The Stepfather, the 1987 horror thriller, is loosely based on the crimes of John List, who is known for the murder of his wife, his two children, and his mother. He met his wife in 1951, and the murders took place 20 years later. List had been struggling financially, and rather than seek government assistance, or maybe it's just the fact that he didn't want a handout, he chose to take matters into his own hands. This is not necessarily the best approach, although I do agree that people should be financially responsible for their families. I don't agree the fact that his resolution, that was definitely not the best way to resolve the family's situation. List had lost his job, and rather than telling his wife what was going on, he kept it to himself for as long as he could, and then just obviously made a very bad decision. All members of the family had been shot in the back of the head, and it was very meticulous planning on List's part. He had canceled newspaper subscriptions, he canceled milk deliveries, he even went as far as writing a letter to his children's school to let them know that the family would be out of state for a time. And it was actually a month before anyone caught on and started to realize something was just a bit odd. The List case is considered the second most infamous case in the state of New Jersey, the first being the Lindbergh baby. List managed to evade authorities for 18 years. The murders occurred in 1981, and he was apprehended in 1989. It was an episode of America's Most Wanted which helped bring List to justice. It's also considered the oldest case ever to be featured on the program, but that is a true testament of how effective that program really is. John List, during the time of his absence, had moved to the state of Colorado. He assumed the name Robert Clark, and he had been remarried 4 years at the time of his apprehension. The adaptation of the List case had been distributed by New Century Vista Film Company and ITC Entertainment. The film had been released 16 years after the murder and 2 years before John List's arrest. Obvious differences between the film and John List case is their jobs. John List had been an accountant. Henry Morrison had been a real estate agent. John List also had committed his crimes based on financial instability, whereas Henry Morrison was in pursuit of the perfect family, so every time things didn't work out, he would just move on. John List, as previously discussed, was found through an episode of America's Most Wanted. With Henry Morrison, it was more of a reprinting of the story or the article giving the details of the murder of his first family at the beginning of the film. John List also only went through one name change. Henry Morrison, during the course of the film, went through, if you count Henry Morrison, because we don't know how many previous name changes he's been through, then that would be 3 changes. If you're not counting the first name, he's only been through 2 name changes. Either way, it's still one more than John List. It's also hinted at in the film that Henry Morrison may have been the product of an unstable family life. In the sequence where after he's read the newspaper article, he's down in the cellar or the basement pitching a fit, and you get these random flashbacks as well as fragmented voices, which gives you just broken bits of memory. So it's led to believe that he had a very dysfunctional or unhappy childhood, which also gives the reason why he wants the perfect family, because he never had one. After the murder of the family at the beginning of the film, Morrison changes his name to Jerry Blake. He marries a widow, Susan, and moves in with his new stepdaughter. Never really took to Jerry, so when this whole shenanigan with the article arose, she became more suspicious than usual, began looking into it. She did ask to have a photo of the murderer sent to her, and obviously the now Jerry Blake intercepted that and changed the photos in order for him to keep his privacy. The article was actually run at the insistence of Jerry's previous brother-in-law, as he's wanting to avenge his sister's death, and understandably that was his family, so who wouldn't want the murderer of their sister to be brought to justice? It doesn't take long before Jerry realizes that everything's stacking up against him. He's no longer comfortable in his new life, and he begins making accommodations elsewhere. The first slip-up happens when he takes a phone call. He's in the kitchen with his wife, Susan, and he refers to himself as Mr. Hopkins. The audience obviously catches on to this maybe much sooner than the wife, as well as Blake. Pauses and says, "Who am I here?" In my opinion, that adds more to the tension, especially the horrified look on the wife's face. This is quickly followed up by a blow to her face with the telephone he had been holding. He assumes that she's dead. He goes after Stephanie. Susan is able to save her daughter. They are able to rid themselves of Jerry Blake. I'm not going to tell you how. It's a cult film. If you haven't seen it, then you should definitely take a look. There was also a TV film released in 1993 called Judgment Day, the John List case, and this actually stars Robert Blake, who ironically was later convicted and acquitted of the murder of his wife. Not necessarily a good combination, but it's just, I always thought it was strange the way that happened. 2 more sequels followed in the Stepfather franchise. Stepfather 2 was released in 1989. The TV movie was released the year of John List's arrest. The Stepfather 3 was released in 1992, 1 year before the release of the TV movie. There had also been a remake for The Stepfather, which was released in 2009, and this was 1 year before the death of John List. He had passed away due to pneumonia. There had been a remake to the Stepfather film. This was released in 2009, and it was released 1 year after John List had passed away from complications from pneumonia. There had also been reference to the John List case in an episode of Law & Order. This was during Season 6, Episode 16. The episode was entitled Savior. And there's also a character who was based off of John List. This was featured in the film The Usual Suspects. The Kaiser Soze character was based off of John List. It was rumored that his character had been threatened by an opposing drug outfit. They wanted him to turn over his business to them. And in order to encourage his opinion, they raped his wife, murdered one of his children, and then threatened to murder the remaining family members if he did not do as they said. In order to prevent this from happening, Soze himself murdered his family. He murdered one of the henchmen and left one survivor to tell the tale. That is pretty much all I have for you guys today. I'm sorry about the long timeline, and I hope you were able to keep up. I was just trying to paint a better picture of how the actual case correlated with films and pop culture references. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later.